Hi, welcome to my bedroom. I am a romance indie author. I'm self-published, self-edit, self-book cover, and I'm about to read from my own bedroom for you right now for free. Bear with me. I did tell you from my bedroom, right? Before we get started, just a couple of quick things. If you give me 1 or so minutes, we'll be underway. I am an indie author, independent writing, independent published. I've actually made this book cover myself. I've edited myself, and I am absolutely not a professional in any of those realms. So please be kind. I'm not even a professional reader, so even though I wrote this, it may not come out perfectly. Just give me a few minutes, okay? Thanks. Chapter 1. Few people meant as much to Tori as her best friend and adopted sister, Samantha. It was a given that she would assist when Sam's boyfriend, Cole, asked for help setting up the proposal party. Cole and Sam had dated since the first semester and moved in together before the third year of college. Tori had always had Samantha as a roommate, but had chosen an apartment of her own in the same building when Samantha moved in with Cole off campus. The girls had been together since third grade, and it felt weird not living together now. Sam had pretty much moved in with Cole in the dorms, and Tori understood when it was time to move. It was Cole who made certain that there were 2 apartments in the same building when he wanted to move in with Samantha. After graduation, Cole took a position and decided to move Sam off campus. He knew she would not go without her best friend and sister. When they decided to move, Tori was dating Cole's best friend, Rod. Tori thought Rod would be the one. He was the only one. They had also begun dating in the first semester at U of M. Tori met Rod at a party and became inseparable almost instantly. Shortly after moving to the apartment, Rod received an invitation to intern at a prestigious school on the East Coast. Rod was attending for pediatrics, and while U of M had an extensive medical program, their public profile did not include pediatrics, and so Rod had always known that his career would lead him away from the university. Tori and Rod maintained their relationship through the third year, with her and Rod skirting back and forth for months. But eventually it became harder and harder to make the trips and find the time, and they found themselves growing further and further apart. There was no light for Tori for months. She was a wreck. He called it off, and she had no option but to bury herself in her studies and cling to her friends in the building. Tori didn't date, flirt, or pay attention to other guys. It had been 1.5 years since she and Rod had split up. She was aware from time to time that Rod was visiting and would make a point to go home to visit her parents for those weeks. Rod would not miss this party, and Tori knew it. There was no escaping it, because there was no way she would miss Sam's proposal. Cole and Tori worked for weeks planning the day Cole would propose. It was 2 weeks before that, when Tori had met him downtown to weigh in on the decision of which ring he would purchase. "Are you sure you're all right with Rod being at the restaurant?" Cole asked Tori, as they sat for lunch one day after ring shopping. "Of course, I am, and even if I weren't, it wouldn't matter. We both love you guys so much. We could set anything aside to support you two," Tori told him. The truth was Tori was crushed. She was crushed every day. Rod had refused to let her transfer to go with him. She knew he needed to go, and she was prepared to go with him, or join him eventually. It was Rod who didn't want to continue. He moved on from her. She had no choice and no opportunity to fix anything. She felt like Rod simply moved on without her. She loved him, and she was certain he loved her, but it was not enough, apparently. Tori sat in her kitchen, counter, with her mirror and makeup spread across it, and heating a curling iron. It was time to get ready to go to the restaurant. She was going to see Rod in a little bit, and there was nothing she could do about it. Tori was thankful, though, because she had listed the help of a friend for the day, so that she was not going to this alone, and she would have someone to lean on. Paul was a good friend and knew about the history between her and Rod. Tori and Paul had classes together in the past couple of years, and he was a resident in her dorm where she had lived there. When they first met, Paul liked Samantha, but Tori was quick to let him know that Sam was spoken for. He had become a friendly face and eventually a friend to both her and Rod. He was also a shoulder to cry on, as she had done plenty of that last year. It was Paul who offered to go to the proposal with Tori. She would not have to go alone, and she was so thankful that he did. Tori placed the iron in her hair, knowing her date would be there soon to pick her up. She felt sick that she was about to see Rod, and was excited to see him. She knew for her nothing had changed. She still loved Rod. As Tori was putting her things away, she heard a knock at the door. She glanced at the clock and noticed it was 15 minutes early. When she opened the door, she found Paul on the other side. Tori blew a sigh of relief as part of her worried about who would be there. "I knew you would be nervous right now, so I figured if I came early, you would not have to be sitting here getting ready to go and letting your mind run away with you," Paul told her. Tori stepped into the hall and threw her arms around him, thankful for the safe, friendly face. "I was just getting ready to start pacing," Tori said, holding the door for Paul open to step in. "Wow," Paul said, stepping back from her. "You look amazing," he said with a quiet whistle. Tori blushed, looking down at her skirt and sandals. "It's not too much, right?" she asked him. "Too much for what, darling?" Paul asked her. "It doesn't look like I'm trying too hard, does it?" she clarified. "Right. Too much like you're trying too hard to get Rod's attention," Paul stated. "Perhaps it would be more appropriate to consider that you are dressed perfectly for an afternoon with me, rather than considering Rod," Paul told her with a smile. "Of course," Tori said, looking concerned. "I'm sorry, this is an afternoon with you. It has nothing to do with him. I'm sorry to be rude. It's natural he's on your mind. It is why I'm here to help you through the day. I'm not jealous. I only mean that if you look right to spend time with me, then you look right. If you see it in that light, then it makes sense," he told her. "I don't plan to pretend we're together," Paul said. "We are friends. I'm not here to make anyone upset, just to support my friend, my gorgeous friend, who could use a little support today." Paul lifted one of Tori's arms and directed her to turn under it while he stood back shaking his head. "Thank you, Paul," she told him. "You make me feel better for sure." "I'm here for you," Paul said, and placed her shawl on her shoulders. The plan was for Cole and Sam to get to the restaurant first, and then everyone else would filter into the back room quietly as they all waited for Cole. Paul drove around town to give Tori a chance to settle down. He played the radio loud and had a black cherry soda for her. She sang and bounced and drank her soda the entire ride. It was the right way to get her where she needed to be. Paul couldn't help but notice how incredible she was, waving her hands in the air and singing at the top of her voice. Paul pulled into the parking lot behind Tori and Sam's parents. Tori was thankful because she saw Rod in his car as they pulled into a spot. She realized that this was going to be harder for Rod than it was going to be for her, as it was all Sam's family and friends, and it would be Rod who was the outsider, aside from a couple of guys from the wrestling team that were friends with Cole. Tori hugged her parents and waited for Paul's arm to guide her into the restaurant. She held on as they crossed the parking lot, and Paul patted her hand to reassure her as they did. When they entered the restaurant, Tori guided everyone to the gathering room. Then she walked into the dining room and waited in the corner quietly to catch Cole's eye. When Cole glanced up at her, she smiled and turned around. She wanted to reassure him everything was good, but not linger long enough that Cole had to acknowledge her. She started back to the gathering room again, and as Tori entered the room, she stood square in front of Rod. "Hello, Tori," he said, searching her eyes. Instantly, Tori felt her knees buckle, and her heart stopped. The moment she felt she would faint, an arm wrapped around her waist and gripped her tight enough for her to lean into. Paul reached out his hand to Rod. "Hi, Rod, how was your flight?" Paul asked as he shook Rod's hand. Tori blew out a slow breath and forced a smile. "It was good. I got in a couple of hours ago," Rod said, never really leaving Tori's gaze. "Drink, darling?" Paul asked Tori, handing her a cup of punch. It was the perfect insistence for Tori to look away and take the cup. Paul gently pulled her away from Rod, and suddenly Tori remembered her purpose. She arranged guests on either side of the room and checked the catering table. Tori got with the server and reminded them she wanted champagne ready to pour right away. Chad and Lori had insisted that they were providing this lunch for the guests, and it was their gift for both Cole and Samantha. It was also a surprise for Cole. As she finished making sure everything was perfect, she saw Cole enter the room. Tori gave him a long hug, told him how much she loved him, and then Chad stepped in to guide Cole to the back of the room with Rod on his side. The room quieted, and Tori waved at the waiter to go get Samantha. Paul walked up beside Tori. "You're doing amazing, beautiful," he told her, and placed a quick kiss on her head. "You've been a lifesaver, Paul," she told him. "I will walk her in when she gets here. When you're able, please get by my side afterward," she asked and squeezed his hand. At the door, Sam appeared and stood still. Tori stepped forward and took Sam's arm in hers. She walked slowly and let Sam take in the people in the room. It was obvious Samantha was not expecting anything. As Tori walked her sister and best friend into the room, all she could see was Rod. Her eyes locked to his, and he held them. Tori felt sick, excited, and if she were floating. Cole stepped out from behind Rod and offered a good distraction as she felt Sam weaken. She handed Sam over to Cole and took 2 steps back. Immediately, Tori felt Paul wrap his arm around her waist and was again very thankful for his constant support. Tori relaxed into his hold and was able to avoid Rod's eyes as she watched her friend accept the proposal, and the room cheered. Paul ushered Tori to a table to sit right beside her friend, across from her parents and next to him. He was careful to make sure she was surrounded and in a safe place. "You saved me," Tori said to Paul. "Twice." "That is why I'm here, darling," Paul told her. "You didn't have to be that good, Paul. I feel safe and secure and protected right now, and it's a huge deal to me. I want to thank you and make sure you know what it means to me to have you here. Everyone here is to support these two, but you are here for me. Seriously, thank you." Tori leaned over and kissed Paul's cheek more sincerely than a quick peck normally would be. Paul ran his hand over her shoulder and lightly squeezed it. "Are you okay?" Sam whispered into Tori's hair after lunch as everyone was chatting. "Yeah, I'm good. Happy to see you, hon," Tori told her. "No, are you okay? With Rod here?" Sam asked, searching Tori's eyes. "Oh, yeah, I am good. It's weird. and hurts a little for sure. But Paul has been good at distracting me and being supportive, and I'm glad he's here," Tori said. "I'm happy to see Paul, but I would not have expected him to be your date at all," Sam said honestly. "He's here to help me get through the afternoon as a friend," Tori said. "I asked him to come, specifically for that reason, and he agreed to support me." "I'm glad," Sam said. "I don't think Rod is, though," she added. "Well, it is no issue to me what he is or isn't glad about, sis. I'm not pretending to have a date or crawl on Paul. If Rod thinks, for a moment, he will remember Paul as a friend, he is Rod's friend too, and yours," Tori said. "I'm very glad he's here. He is our friend for sure. I'm glad he is here for you today too, because I'm certainly a little distracted, so he was able to fill in where I might normally. I'm thankful to him too," Sam said with a smile, and hugged her friend. Rod sat on the other side of Cole, talking with him and Chad. He participated in the conversation and politely served Chad's mother as though she were his date for the day. His heart sank the moment he saw Tori. Rod knew it would be hard to see her. He knew there was no way she would not be part of today, and he knew, for sure, it was going to kill him to see her. "Doing all right?" Cole asked Rod quietly, when Chad had left his seat to go talk to Tori. Rod shrugged. "I think so." "I'm sorry, dude. I hated to insist, but there's no other way I was going to have this day, not including you. You're my closest friend, and she is Samantha's sister. There is no way you could ever quit her completely and still be part of my life. Besides, if you find a way now, then it won't be so hard when you are both at my wedding," Cole said. Rod chose to change the subject. "You're getting married. Holy shit." Cole slapped his buddy's back and grinned. "I expect you to come to our place this evening when this wraps up and stay the night with us," he told Rod. Rod nodded and climbed out of his chair to get another drink. At the drink table, Rod found himself beside Paul. "How's it been?" Rod asked Paul. "Pretty good, getting ready for break soon," Paul answered. "Any plans for your break?" Rod wondered if he would include Tori. "I'll go back to my folks for the week and see old friends," Paul said. "I see," Rod nodded. "We aren't together, man," Paul said. Rod lowered his glass and just stared at Paul. "She is a friend. I have been here with her the whole time. I care very much about Tori, but she and I are friends. We hung out, but I did not move in after you. I swear," Paul continued. "Appreciate the honesty," Rod said. "She isn't done crying, Rod. It kills me all the time to hold and hug her while she cries over you. I am certain tonight would be more of the same. You broke her, man. And while I have good respect for the friendship you and I had, I hate you for what you did to her," Paul explained. "I regret it if it helps," Rod offered. Paul nodded. "It's the way it needs to be. I'm glad that she has someone to lean on." Rod shook Paul's hand again and turned and walked away. Irritated, Rod found he was cursing to himself as he sat alone at the table. Paul's words spun in his mind. "You broke her." Rod wanted to hit something. He sat holding his fist as a pair of arms circled his neck from around behind. It was Sam. She hugged and pulled at his shoulders and then slid into the chair beside him. Sam placed her head on Rod's shoulder. "I'm so glad you came, Rod. How's your program going?" Sam asked. "Wouldn't miss it, love," Rod told her. "The program is good and will be completed in a year or so." "Wow, that went quickly." Sam told him. How is she? Rod asked. Sam took a deep breath. She's okay most of the time. She's not okay sometimes. Rod knew Sam would be honest with him. I'm so sorry, Sam. I didn't want to cause pain. I thought it would be easier for her. I swear, You still love her, Sam told Rod. Yeah, he said, but I have no right. Maybe not, but it doesn't change the truth, Sam offered. Nope, Rob said, placing a kiss on the top of her head. It does not. The truth is, I have to go back east, and I can't help it. As the party quieted down, Rod helped Chad walk his mother to the car. We miss you, son, Chad told Rod. Yeah, it was great getting to know you, Rod told him. She misses you, Chad added. Sir, Rod started. Listen, you're respectable, Rodney. I am sure you have your reasons. I just wanted you to know that we enjoyed having you around, and we miss it. Everyone has to make their own decisions in life. I won't fault you for that, Chad said. The two of them shook as Chad reached for Lori. She hugged Rod as they walked out of the restaurant to the car where Chad's mother was waiting. Rod looked around the room and decided he would hear Tori's voice even if it killed him. He walked over to the table where she sat with Sam, Cole, and Paul. Rod kissed Sam's head and patted Cole on the back, stating he would text in a while. He turned and shook Paul's hand and then placed a hand on Tori's shoulder. You look fantastic, Tori. It was great to see you, Rod said, and remained there, waiting for an answer. Tori felt her face flush, and then turned in her chair to face him. Nice to see you. Take care. She flashed a smile, and then turned away from him again. Paul placed a hand on her arm and gripped it. As Rod moved to grab his things off the table, he watched Tori slouch into Paul's shoulders and knew that it was unfair of him to try to make her talk to him. When he climbed in his car, Rod beat the steering wheel until his hands felt numb. He glanced up to see that the door of the restaurant was open and Cole emerged holding it. Rod knew Sam and Tori and Paul would be following him. So he put his car in gear and pulled away. Fucking hell, Rod screamed at the windshield. He turned up the radio and drove. After a few minutes, he pulled into a parking lot and realized he didn't remember much of the drive there until that minute. He pulled his hands down his face and looked up to see he was at Mac's. He had driven to the bar. Stopped at Mac's for a bit. I'll text when I'm on my way so you can have a little privacy. Rod. Take it easy. Call if you need me. Cole. Chapter 2. And a quick reminder that this and all of my books are available on Amazon ebook and on Kindle Unlimited. Paul drove Tori home. He played the radio, but Tori never made a sound, and so he turned it down. She sat staring out the window. It was difficult because Paul had watched her fall apart and nearly get back to herself in the last year. Right now, he could hear her heart breaking again. Helping Tori out of the car, Paul felt the weight of her mind and the toll of the day had taken on her. He took the key from her hand and opened the door. Tori walked in and peeled off her sandals and dropped her shawl and headed straight to her room. He removed his jacket and went to her fridge to take out 2 beers from the 6-pack he had brought earlier. He was all too familiar with how the evening would go. She would bitch, then cry, then he would put her to bed and leave. Tori came out of the back in pajama pants and a t-shirt. She was hot, even wearing frumpy clothes, and Paul fought the urge to try to kiss her tears away. She grabbed the throw blanket and fell on the couch, folding her legs under her. She reached forward and took the beer Paul set out for her. Thank you for going with me, she said after a minute. Of course, darling, Paul told her, sitting on the other side of the couch. Are you going to be all right? I think so, she answered. Tori sat staring across the room. She was off in another world, and Paul realized the normal didn't seem to be how Tori was handling this. Would you like me to leave you, Tori? Paul asked. A tear slid down Tori's cheek. Please don't leave me, Paul, she whispered. Okay, sweetie. I will stay until you tell me it's time to go. I won't ask again, he told her with a smile and reached over and squeezed her arm. Tori shifted and fell onto him, laying face up in his lap. She wasn't crying. She didn't look mad. She just laid there. Paul stroked her face and drank his beer. She felt numb. There was no other way to put it. She wasn't sad. She wasn't mad. She just felt numb. Being in the same room with Rod and not being able to be with him felt ridiculous. He had managed it, though. It didn't bother Rod. He didn't want her. Paul's thumb slowly rubbed her face as she looked up at him. He was there, right by her side. He was there the minute she needed him, every single time. He took it on himself to make sure she was okay, and as okay as she could be. He saved her more than once and asked for nothing. You're a lifesaver, Tori said. Just want to make sure you're all right, Paul told her. I know, but you don't have to be. You stood right there, right beside me. You held me up. I'm thankful, Tori explained. Happy to do it, Paul said and smiled at her. I spent the week worried about today. I spent the past year and a half in a fog over that breakup. You've been here the entire time. Tori was thinking out loud. She knew that was right. All this time it was Paul who was continually by her side. She wasn't probably ever going to be in love with Paul, and she suspected he wished that she would. But right now, she knew that she did love him for taking such good care of her. Truly, I'm grateful you've been such a good friend, and I want you to know that I love you for it, Tori told him. She sat up and slid herself onto his lap. I'm sorry if you would have wanted more than a friend out of me, Paul, but I don't think we'll ever be more than good friends. Placing his palm on her cheek, Paul found her eyes. He searched them for a moment, and then Tori closed them and reached for him. She felt Paul settle on her lips. He placed a light kiss, and as he pulled away, she followed him. Tori moved her mouth over hers. She pulled her arms around his neck and held on to him. Tori opened her lips and licked at his. Paul wrapped his hands around her waist and accepted the invitation, sliding his tongue into her mouth. She stroked his tongue and moaned into his mouth. Tori's kiss grew more frantic, and she pressed harder into him. One more second, committing every smell and taste of her to memory, and then he pulled away for sure. She sat, panting on his lap. Tori didn't understand. Why did he stop her? When you tell me we will never be more than friends, and then kiss me like that? I do not know what the best thing to do here is, Tori. I'm a good guy, but even I may not be able to tell you no if you want me, Paul said. He left his arms around her, because if she really did want him, then he was ready for that too. I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to kiss you. I didn't expect to feel like I didn't want to stop. You've been such a strong and positive force in my life lately, and I'm grateful, but I know you want more. I don't know if it'll ever be that. Right now, though, yeah, I do want you, even though I can't promise you anything tomorrow, Tori said. You want me to stay with you tonight? Paul asked. I'm asking you to stay, and I don't know or care what happens as long as you are still my good friend in the morning, Tori told him. She sat there on his lap and searched his face. Paul smiled. I will stay with you. We will be the same tomorrow. Understand that I do care very much about you, but I would rather be here for you now and maybe with you tonight over not having you at all. Besides, I cannot tell you no, darling. I can't leave if or when you need me, Paul told her. She placed her hand on Paul's chest and just rested there for a bit. She finished her beer and got up and got 2 more. They talked about the proposal and how surprised Sam was. They speculated about a wedding and how long it would take to plan it. Paul suggested Sam would be one who would plan for a year or more, but Tori insisted Sam would want a small, private ceremony, and soon. After completing beer 2, Tori took the cans and then returned to the couch and sat again on Paul, facing him on her knees. She smiled and leaned in and kissed him. Tori pressed into him and allowed her hips to rock on his legs as he pulled her in closer. Tori released and pulled her shirt over her head. This was not the first time seeing Tori shirtless, as he had put her to bed a few times, though he had stayed on the couch those times. Tori reached back and unhooked her bra and placed it on the couch beside her. Paul looked a minute and then softly ran his hands over her collarbone and the back of his hand between her breasts. So beautiful, he told her when he found her eyes. Tori bent and kissed him. Paul lifted her to her feet and stood. She turned and hung her hand beside her. He placed his hand in hers and followed her to the bedroom. Once there, Tori went to her dresser. She took off her necklace and earrings, and then turned to face Paul. She then removed her pants and crawled onto the bed and under the covers, waiting for him to join her. He took his shirt and pants off and climbed under the covers beside her, and Tori draped her leg over him and her arm over his chest and started kissing him more. His hand ran up and down her back and stroked at her hair. He let her trail kisses down his neck and chest and took her lips again and again. Is something the matter? Tori asked after several minutes of kissing. No, darling, Paul said. It feels like taking this further would be taking advantage of you, and I care enough not to want that. Okay, we're going to start that paragraph again. I apologize. No, darling, Paul said. It feels like taking this further would be taking advantage of you, and I care enough not to want that. I do want to be here with you all night and take care of you, kissing and touching you. I will be holding you when you fall asleep and when you wake up. Promise. But you don't want me, Tori said, with her voice breaking. I want you more than anything, sweetheart. But you want someone else. And not only would you feel terrible tomorrow, but I would too, knowing you didn't really want me, Paul said. I want to not feel this way. I want to be normal. I want to move on, Tori sniffed as she placed her head on his chest. I know, baby. Listen, if you want me right now, if you tell me right now that you want this for sure, then I will take you right now. But you have to swear you will be my same Tori tomorrow, and that nothing else changes, Paul told her. Tori lay still for a long moment. She considered that it was unkind to have sex with Paul when he was not the guy for her in the long run. She was not sure who was, though. Maybe it was Paul. She knew it had been a very long time since, and it was nice having someone hold her now. She knew she could trust Paul. She knew for sure she didn't want to use him. I realize it's not nice for me to want you right now when a relationship more than we always have had may not be a possibility. I'm sorry to make you feel like I'm begging. Honestly, my insides hurt so much and for so long. I guess I just hoped a friend I trusted would help me forget about it for a while. I'm sorry, Tori said, and she squeezed around his ribs tight. Paul felt a tear land on his chest, and something deeper than he could control groaned low in him. Please do not cry, honey, he begged. I want you so much, I just don't want you to regret asking me to. Tori pushed up toward his face and took his lips. She kissed soft and gentle, and then deeper and harder. She let her hands roam down Paul's chest, and then pulled him to roll to his side and pressed into her. Tori ran her hands down his back and pressed into his sides and moved her hand around in front of him, tracing the hem of his boxers. I swear nothing changes tomorrow. She pressed into him, pressed into his kiss, and then opened her mouth, accepting his tongue. Tori felt every muscle contract in Paul's shoulders and arms as he pulled up from the kiss. Tell me this is what you want, he commanded huskily. Paul, I want you inside me, she answered. Then Paul took control as he kissed her harder, and then down her chest, pulling and sucking her nipples. Tori moaned and ran her fingers through his hair, holding him to her. He placed a hand on the moist heat of her panties and rubbed light, small circles into the fabric, and Tori arched her back. He took both hands and pulled her panties free. Tori lay naked, grabbing for Paul as he came to kiss her again, and then, placing his knees between hers, he worked the kisses down her body until he rested his elbows between her thighs. He stroked in and out of the folds with the pad of his thumb, and Tori rose and hummed with every touch. Paul bent in and sucked the fleshy nub into his mouth, and Tori cried out. As he licked and sucked, Paul reached his fingers into her opening with a come here motion that had Tori panting and coming in seconds. Paul stayed there and pulled another one from her, and then he took his time, tasting and licking her until she settled into a rhythm of moans and groans. He planted kisses as he climbed Tori's body, taking each nipple and her neck before kissing her lips. You taste amazing, he told her as he climbed out of his boxers. With her hands wrapped around his cock, Paul drew a sharp breath. He was full and hard, and Tori found that he was impressive for not being the normal build of guy she was used to. She certainly thought he had as much as anyone else might. She gently pushed on his shoulder, and Paul landed beside her on the sheet. Tori kissed down his chest and stomach until she was able to lean on her elbow beside his hip. She let her hands work him and heard his breathing hitch, and he uttered 4 little words in barely a whisper. Tori raised herself and took him into her mouth and slid the full length and back up, releasing him with a pop sound. Good God, baby, I am going to explode under you, Paul told her. That would be just fine, too, if you changed your mind about going any further. Pulling him into her mouth again, Tori went slowly and carefully, as she didn't want him to not have the time to enjoy this. She heard Paul suck in the air and controlled the release of it. She smiled to herself. It was fun having this much control over a man. She laid her tongue against the base and licked his entire length and placed slow kisses at the top. Tori caressed his balls and continued to play with him. Paul let her have her way. He loved her touch and wanted nothing more than to explode, but he had control and knew he could hold out for as long as she needed to. Hopefully. She was so warm and soft, and the hair draped over his stomach felt amazing. He distracted himself with conversions they had had earlier and conversations from the couch, and even tried to remember math problems to maintain his ability to play with her. Tori shifted her knees under her and hovered over Paul with her legs by his shoulders, and then slid her tongue full up and down him, closing her mouth around the base. Paul gripped her hanging breasts and twisted her nipples, causing her to moan and roll around his dick. He nearly lost it at that moment. When he regained his control, he lifted her leg, pulling her over his face, and dove into her pussy as if he were starved. Baby, I cannot hold out much longer. If you want me inside you, then you will have to stop that soon. But if you want to continue, then I will make you come with me, Paul told her. Tori took a long, hard suck of him. Make me come with you, she panted. Paul buried his face between her legs and slid his tongue in and out of her opening. Tori rocked against his mouth with no control. She had begun to suck and pull at him in rhythm with his tongue. Paul felt the urge build quickly, and as she moaned and nearly cried out around his dick in her mouth, he felt her legs begin to shake and her abs tighten. It was time. With a low groan, Paul pulled on Tori's ass to crash to his face with her as he pressed his tongue into the folds, causing her to come, and a second later he emptied across her tongue. Paul licked her for a moment, pulling every bit in, and then released her. He felt Tori's cheek resting on the top of his thigh and knew he would need just a moment, so he caressed her legs and bottom as she hung suspended over his head. A moment or so passed before she was able to get her thoughts straight, and she lifted herself to join him at the top of the bed. Tori pulled the blankets with her and rested her head on his shoulder. They lay quietly for a moment, and Paul thought she was asleep. I'm glad you're staying, Tori said. Me too, Paul told her. Let's get some clothes on, so we can be friends in the morning, darling. There it was. He called her darling again, just like always, and Tori smiled to herself. He had taken the chance and tried to help her relax and forget for a moment without going far enough for either of them to regret. And now he was back to talking like her friend. Perfect. This is chapter 3. It's the last chapter for now. I just want to remind you again that this book and all of the rest of mine are available on Amazon as ebooks and also on Kindle Unlimited. I'm 4 beers in and okay to drive. See you in 15 or so. Rod. Doors open. Cole. When Rod pulled up to the apartments, he noticed Cole's car, and he noticed Paul's car. It was after midnight. Rod sat with his hands gripping the wheel. He knew Paul was with Tori. As a friend, he thought, perhaps they were just hanging out. But he knew Tori well enough to know any friend was still secretly wanting to have her. Paul seemed decent, and Rod could not blame him. It sounded like they were friends. Sam told him as much. Even Paul told him today. He was only her friend, and how broken she was. Rod didn't have anyone to blame but himself. If Tori had remained single, and she had for over a year, then she certainly did her part to prove how much she cared about him. If Paul had been a steadfast friend and supportive of her that entire time, then why shouldn't he earn her trust and get her in the long run? Suddenly, Rod felt as if he were about to bend the steering wheel of his rental, and so he got out and headed in. Samantha sat in her PJs with her legs draped over Cole on the couch. She was flipping through bridal magazines. When she saw Rod enter, Sam jumped to her feet and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Today's bride," Rob said, reading the title with an eyebrow raised. "She made me stop on the way home from the restaurant and buy it," Cole said, teasing his fiancée. Rod smiled. They were truly happy and absolutely in love. "Let me see the rock, Sess." Samantha walked over and perched herself on Rod's knee, with her arm hung around his shoulder. He twisted and turned it on her finger. "It's engraved," she told him, moving the ring from her hand and turning it up so Rod could read it. "All my love, all my days, Cole." "Almost as gorgeous as you are, sweetie," Rod told her, and kissed her cheek. "I was so surprised," she told him, as they talked about the proposal party and all the people there, and how Sam had no idea what was happening all along. "He's been planning this for a couple of months," Rod confessed to his friend. "He went way overboard, an entire lunch and champagne," Sam stated. "Sweetheart, the lunch and champagne were your parents doing. I had some wine and snacks ordered," Cole admitted. They set that up with Tori. Cole hated himself the moment he said her name and saw Rod's eyes drop to the floor. "Sorry, man. I didn't think before I spoke." Cole tried to apologize. "Nope, it's no problem. I came knowing I would see her," Rod said. "She looked pretty good and seemed happy. Paul seems to have been taking good care of her." Rod regretted it the minute he said it. "They're just friends," Sam offered. "Sweetie," Rod started, "guys do not spend a year by your side and late nights in your apartment, like tonight, wanting to just be friends." Sam looked at Cole, who shrugged. "That's pretty fair, really," he told her. "Well, to Tori he's just a friend," Sam clarified. "She is still totally your girl, Rod, and would jump in your arms this minute if you knocked on the door." Rod smiled. "Tempting, but she's getting over me. Our lives are going in two different directions, and it's not okay to have her for years waiting for me. I won't do it. Instead, you make her sit forever crying over you, missing you, hating you, loving you," Sam said. "Samantha," Cole placed his hand on her leg. "Nope, sorry, love, but you can handle the truth you aren't here to see. If you made this right in your mind, thinking she would be happier or better off if you broke it off, you were wrong. You know I love you, but you also know I have to tell you the truth. Sam gave one nod. It's okay, Rod said nothing. I probably messed that up, but it's done now. She can move on, and I will leave it be. Well, all I know is the two of you will be in a wedding soon, and you have to find a way to make it through that as well, Sam said. She wrapped her other arm around Rod, hugging him tightly. I know you're hurting too, and I know you love her. I also know that it is not my business, so I won't push. I love you, and I'm sorry to have to say things you don't want to hear, but I wouldn't be me if I weren't honest. I am glad you two are honest, Sam. I love you too, Rod said as Sam stood from his knee to rejoin Cole on the couch, handing Rod a soda. They talked and laughed and enjoyed each other's company into the night until Sam got tired and brought Rod a pillow and blanket for the couch. Then Cole joined her in the bedroom to make more "we just got engaged" love to her into the night. The next morning, Rod woke to find his friends were not up yet. He scribbled a note on the pad that he was going to get breakfast and grabbed his keys. When he arrived in the parking lot, he noticed Paul's car was still there. Her friend stayed the night. Rod felt every single muscle in his body react to it and fought the urge not to kick down the door. Instead, he got in his car and headed to the drive-thru. When Rod returned to the apartment, he gathered the food and climbed out of the car. He was a dozen steps into his walk when he looked up to see Paul exiting the building and walking toward him. Morning, Paul said as he approached Rod on the sidewalk. Paul, Rod said as he nodded. Kind of a long night for a friend, I think. Are you asking a specific question? Paul asked as he stopped in front of Rod. Rod was easily 1.5 times Paul's size and could crush him if he wanted to. I just remembered you telling me all about your friendship before spending the night with Tori, Rod said. I remember that too, Paul stated. I just hope you're not taking advantage, Rod started. Now, wait a minute, Paul interrupted. My friend Tori is not your business, Rod. I have been respectful of you and her past relationship and have been a perfect gentleman and friend to her. I do not owe you an explanation for how long, late, or how much time I spend with her. I do care for her very much, and I hope someday she returns those feelings. Paul ran his hand across his neck. Look, he continued, she knows exactly how I feel. It seems to me the same cannot be said about you. Here's your opportunity, man. If you want Tori, then I will respectfully listen and stay away. But if you're not going to heal her broken heart right now, then please leave her alone and let me continue to be the friend she needs. Rod searched Paul's face for any sign of aggression. There was none. He was right. Rod knew he was right. Just because he was in town for the weekend, he had no right to shove her friends away. Paul did nothing wrong. He was not an enemy to Rod. Certainly, Rod could be thankful that Tori had Paul. He was a good guy and had been a good friend. Rod didn't have to worry some guy would hurt her at all. You're right, Rod said plainly. I'm not able to heal her as she wants, and my presence upsets her. I'm glad you're here to help her through it, and I apologize for suggesting otherwise. It's a difficult situation, and while I do not want anyone to touch her, I truly don't blame you. She still loves you, and it kills me." "Do whatever you like with that," Paul said, shrugging his shoulders. He took a couple steps back toward the building and opened the door and stood beside it, nodding to Rod. "Your hands are full." "Thanks," Rod replied, stepping through the door and into the building. Paul resumed his trek back to the parking lot and got in his car. When Tori woke, she heard the rustling of the bag and opened her eyes to see breakfast being spread out in front of her. Paul knew her order and had all her favorite things in front of her as she was putting a straw in the orange juice. Tori ate like she had been skipping meals for days, and Paul teased her that he would have to go get more just to satisfy her. "Perhaps satisfaction is what made me hungry," Tori said with a wink. She was flirting with him. She had always been friends, but now she was full-on flirting with him. "You're probably right," Paul said, smiling back. "You let me know if you ever lose your appetite again, and we'll fix it right away." He poked at her rib as she jumped away, giggling. Tori's phone dinged from her dresser, and Paul got it for her. "You helped me feel a little more like myself, wanted and needed and sexy. I'm grateful that you spent the night, Polly, and I am glad you were able to steer us to having fun rather than going places with feelings. You know I care about you," Tori said, leaning over and giving him a real kiss. "Thank you for breakfast. I would be interested in having a date, like dinner or such, sometime soon. I would like to explore the idea of seeing if we might want to be more than friends. I'm very attracted to you. You're an amazing guy, and I feel like I'm ready to move on soon. So not today, but promise you will ask me out for real soon?" "Last one for now," Paul said, and wrapped his hand in her hair. "I will take you out on a real date soon, Tori," he told her, and kissed her long and slow, savoring every moment before letting go. She looked into his eyes and smiled. Then she picked up her phone to see what message had come through. "Want to grab dinner with us? Paul, too, if he wants. Sam." Tori turned the phone to Paul, who read the text. "Can if you want, but I have other things to do today, so I need to go," he told her. "I would love to. Paul can't today. Tori." "Wait." Tori paused from her coffee. "Why would she say you could go? Why would she include you as if she knew you were here?" "I saw Rod in the parking lot on my way to get breakfast," Paul told her. "Oh, so they assumed you stayed the night, and the invitation should include you because you're here now," Tori guessed. "Makes sense, I guess. But they know I've stayed before. I wouldn't read too much into that," Paul said. "Maybe. But Rod will read a whole lot into it," Tori figured. "He did," Paul confessed. "What?" Tori asked. "He said something about friends spending the night together. I told him we are friends and that I care about you. And that if he was... I'm sorry. I told him that we are friends and that I care about you. And that he was out of line assuming anything happened, basically," Paul explained. "There was a bit more to it, and that was between him and me. But after a couple of exchanges, Rod apologized to me for accusing me of taking advantage, and I held the door for him to enter the building." Tori nodded what the bit more was, but decided it didn't matter, as she assumed Paul had stuck up for her. "So he must have told them you were here then," she said. "I'm sorry if this was awkward for you." "It would be no matter what, because he hurt you, not because I like you, darling," Paul told her honestly. So that's the first 3 chapters of my second book. Once again, they're available on Amazon if you'd like to order. I'll be posting another video in the next day or so with the next chapters and so on until I've read the entire book. Not asking for anything more than your attention. Good night.